There were these two guys who decide to go on a hike. After a while, they decide to sit down and take a break. They've been walking for a while. With sore feet, they take off their shoes when suddenly they spot a bear. The first one reaches for his shoes and starts to lace them back up. The second one says, "What are you doing? Putting your shoes back on. You'll never be able to outrun that bear." The first one replies, "I don't need to outrun the bear. I only need to outrun you." Which he does. The slow, barefoot hiker, seeing the bear approaching and thinking that the end is near, begins to pray. He says what he thinks are his final words, "Shema Yisrael, hear Israel." Suddenly, the bear stops and puts on the yarmulke. The hiker, shocked at the sight of a bear with a yarmulke, he said, "What luck! This must be the only Jewish bear in the world. We're mishpacha, family. I'm saved." Then the bear opens his mouth and starts praying himself. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. I give thanks to God for man. The end. And so begins tonight's sermon on food. Food, or more specifically, the lack thereof, is a striking feature on Yom Kippur because we Jews aren't often given to fasting. It's pretty much today, and for some very traditional folk, a few other times of the year. Other Jewish holidays have been summarized as, "They tried to kill us, we're still here, let's eat." Not Yom Kippur. No eating. Unless you're a whale, and the meal is the prophet Jonah, as happens in tomorrow afternoon's Haftarah. Come along. Or seriously, if you have a medical reason, don't fast. Take care of yourself. Now, plenty of cultures around the world emphasize the importance of food. One of my grandmothers was Italian, and trust me, Italians do food really well too. In fact, I think when I had been a rabbi for about a week, I was a week into being a rabbi, not here, just in general. So it was almost 15 years ago. I won an award, 1 week as a rabbi, I won an award for making a difference in the Tucson Jewish community. I just got there. It became a bit of a joke, actually, because getting that award, well, I didn't do anything for it. But I was part of a group that won the award, so I got included. And the group that won the award were all the synagogue rabbis in Tucson, Arizona. And I was one of them. And the honor, much as I appreciated it, was actually a bit of a gimmick to attract people to a fundraiser that benefited a local school. Anyways, the event included a meal, and the caterer decided that each local rabbi being honored could pick one food for the menu. One food, and the caterer said the theme of the dinner would be food that a grandparent made that they remembered growing up. And they would make that and serve it for dinner. Now, I actually had 5 grandparents, 4 biological grandparents, and my grandfather remarried to a step-grandmother as well, who for all purposes was also a grandparent to me. 4 Jewish grandparents, 1 Italian grandmother. Of the 5 of them, I only really remember 1 ever cooking, my Italian grandmother. So this caterer, it was a kosher caterer, wanted me to pick out 1 food a grandparent of mine made so they could replicate it for dinner. And I thought of my grandmother's Italian knot cookies, which I loved. But cookies wouldn't work. They needed a main course. I was still feeling a little rebellious, and thinking of my Italian grandmother some more, I said, lasagna, which actually my mom made a lot more than my grandma when I was a kid. But it was going to be a meal that served meat, and the kosher caterer, not wanting to mix meat and dairy in the same meal, couldn't use cheese, so they declined to make a lasagna. We eventually settled on rigatoni and a basic tomato sauce. So dinner is served with a menu made up of requests from all the area rabbis. You had different kinds of kugel, brisket, matzo ball soup, kasha varnishkas, and rigatoni. So it's not that Jews are unique in our love for food. Lots of cultures take pride in their food, except for the British. So they do have really good pies, and sticky toffee pudding it's wonderful. Lots of cultures, though. Even so, there are particular ways that food, or the lack thereof when we're fasting, plays out in Jewish tradition. Our tradition teaches that enjoying food obligates us to be grateful. Simply put, gratitude is a mitzvah. Let me explain by starting with that opening joke from earlier about the bear saying the motzi. If the punchline worked, it's because of two unexpected things. First, bears don't talk. And second, the idea that a bear would pause before attacking a would-be meal for prayer. Prayer is a human thing. And prayer in the context of a meal takes an action that could be purely instinctual. It takes an appetite and it sanctifies it. In other words, prayer at its best elevates something that's mundane, something that's necessary, and gives us a moment to pause and to reflect, to think about what we're doing. Eating, then, is not just about responding to hunger. It's also a moment to express gratitude for what we have. And fasting does something similar today. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, they say. But tomorrow night's breakfast will perhaps be especially appreciated coming after a fast. There's a passage in the Torah, in Parashat Ki Tavo, Deuteronomy, that takes this even further. It talks not just about a person saying a prayer before eating, but has a ritual for farmers too, when the first harvest of the season comes. Here's what Deuteronomy says. Here's what the Torah says. Quote, "When you enter the land that the eternal your God is giving to you as a heritage, and you possess it and settle in it," and remember, this is in the Torah, so these are Israelites who left slavery in Egypt and they're on their way to the promised land. So when they get to the land and they settle it, you shall take some of the first fruit of the soil which you harvest from the land that your God is giving you, and take that first fruit and place it in a basket and go to the place where your eternal God will establish the divine name. That's the temple in Jerusalem. You shall go to the priest in charge at that time and say to the priest, quote, "I acknowledge this day before the eternal your God that I have entered the land that the eternal swore to our fathers to assign to us. The priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down in the altar of the eternal your God. You shall then recite as follows before your God. My father was a fugitive Aramaean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Eternal, the God of our ancestors, and God heard our plea and saw our plight and our misery and our oppression. And God freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, and awesome power, by the signs and portents bringing us to this place and giving us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey." By the way, if that sounds familiar to you, it became later on the core of the Passover Haggadah. The passage continues, "Wherefore the farmer is saying, I now bring the first fruits of the soil, which you, God, have given me. You shall leave it before God and bow low before your God. And you shall enjoy," they want the food to go to waste. I mean, we offer it to God, but we don't let it rot. "You shall enjoy the food together with the family of the Levite, who has no land, and the stranger in your midst, who also has no land, presumably. All the bounty that your God has bestowed upon you and your household." That passage is all about gratitude. The farmer obviously worked hard. Much of what came up from the ground is owing to his work. I've never been a farmer, but I've tried to keep many plants alive. I'm sure it's hard work to be a farmer. The farmer worked, yet the farmer was also told to express gratitude. The farmer is told to remember how that land even came into his possession. God freed his ancestors from slavery in Egypt. Not to mention God made the world. And the farmer shows that gratitude not just by acknowledging God, but also by sharing the food that he harvested with the Levite, who had no land, and the stranger who also would not have had land, with the widow and the orphan, all people who are in need. When we are hungry is when we're most often focused on ourselves and our own needs. But even when fasting, especially when fasting, we are commanded to be concerned about others as well. And that is one of the great lessons of Yom Kippur. Our Haftarah tomorrow morning from the book of Isaiah discusses this very point. Isaiah says, "Why, when we fasted, did you not see? When we starved our bodies, did you pay no heed? Because on your fast day, you see to your business and oppress all your laborers. Because you fast in strife and contention, and you strike with a wicked fist, your fasting today is not such as to make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast I desire? A day for people to starve their bodies? Is it bowing the head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast, the day when God is favorable? No. This is the fast I desire. To unlock fetters of wickedness, to untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. It is to share your bread with the hungry, and to take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to ignore your own kin. Then shall your light burst through like the dawn, and your healing spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall march before you. The presence of God shall be your rear guard." In other words, the point of the fast is to teach us what it is like to go without. Because some people go without not by choice, but by their own circumstance, which is why we, along with many other synagogues, are holding a food drive this time of the year. The collection bins are in the lobby. And it's why the Jewish Community Relations Council of Atlanta hosts a hunger seder every year to highlight both the presence of hunger as well as possible ways to alleviate it. I had the honor of leading it this past spring. And so perhaps what the Yom Kippur fast is trying to do is to get us to focus on two seemingly paradoxical things simultaneously. The first is ourselves. Fasting is suffering. It's supposed to be. It's not fun. It's not pleasant. An easy fast misses the point. Fasting forces us to pay attention to ourselves. On Yom Kippur, our attention is inward. We take stock of ourselves, who we are, what led us here, and where we want to go. And second, it simultaneously teaches us to stop focusing on ourselves so much, that we instead focus on others and on God. As Hillel the elder taught, if I'm not for myself, then who will be for me? That part, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? That doesn't just mean that we stand up for ourselves, though it does. It also means that individually, we are primarily responsible for who we are and what we do. And then Hillel continues, if I am only for myself, what am I? At the beginning of the Torah, we read the story of Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. God confronts Cain, asking rhetorically, where is your brother Abel? And Cain responds, am I my brother's keeper? The rest of the Torah is an answer to Cain's question. And the answer is yes. We all have responsibilities towards one another. responsibilities we're reminded about on this Yom Kippur. When we eat, our tradition teaches us to bless. May our fast also be a blessing. May the year ahead, 5,785, be filled with blessings. The blessing of self-fulfillment, the blessings we can receive from others, the blessings we can be to others, and the blessings we pray to receive from God. Amen.